You don't want to wake the dragon, do you?
No.
Here comes a wave meant to wash me away. A tide that is taking me under. Swallowing sand left with nothing to say. My voice drowned out in the thunder. But I won't cry, and I won't start to crumble.
Men will never willingly bow to the weakest sex. Silence yourself.
And they will suffer greatly for it. It's like a badge of honor. Where do you know him to blame when the sky falls down upon you?
Do you know what I hold in my hand? Absolute power.
Do not test my power, and do not tempt my fury.
This is my kingdom. I spent my life in foreign lands. So many men have tried to kill me. I don't remember all their names. I have been sold like a brood mare. I've been shamed and betrayed. He betrayed me. Why? Wait. And defy. Do you know what kept me standing? Faith. Not in any gods. Not in myths and legends. In myself. In Daenerys Targaryen.
I am Melis Spectator, and I will bow to no man.
I am Mary, Queen of Scots, and I have come to my throne.
I will not share my throne with anyone.
I was born to rule the Seven Kingdoms. And I will.
You assume I no longer possess the power to crush you.
Of course I'm going to kill her!
They can try.
I'll show you lightning!
And they will know what we can do!
I will face every threat to my reign with sword in hand, and any who stand in my way shall fall.
Your reign is over.
You've beaten me at my own game.
Don't flatter yourself. You were never even a player.
My reign has just begun.